Hello and welcome to Kirkwall Airport in Orkney in X-Plane, and today we have the C90 mod. I'll just show you the right page. This is the community forum mod for the C90 that gives it winglets and a new paint scheme and many systems updates, and highly recommended. And the reason for making this video today is it's kind of following on from the one I did a few months ago on the C90 autopilot tips and tricks revisited, where I kind of did startup, takeoff, and kind of initial GPS and autopilot, and I had lots of really good feedback on that video from real world King Air pilot and someone else who either also is or at least knows the fuel systems really well. So I kind of wanted to try and share the info that I've been given, because I just appreciate it very much. When I'm simming, I don't want to spend like all my time going through everything in detail that you do on a cold dump, but on the other hand, I would like to kind of get it right and at least be able to explain systems properly. So that's an attempt to do that. I want to do that on this flight, basically try and pass on the info I've been given. And the plan for the flight should be fairly straightforward. I'll just show you on the map. So the plan is to go from Kirkwall over here to Stornoway, basically VOR to VOR. Take off from Kirkwall's pretty straightforward, runway 27, and then go on to this 248-degree bearing from Kirkwall VOR, and we'll cover the arrival in Stornoway. You know, when we get up in the cruise. So first, let's get on with this. So if we jump in, first thing I want to do is close. I also usually forget this. I have made a little checklist, so I'll try and use some of it. Actually, this time is close the cabin door. Now the mod starts completely cold and dark, which is nice, and all the switches are off. So even if you forget to turn everything off, which of course you should do at the flight, at least it's going to be in that state. And now then, essentially the procedure is to get the engine started without wasting too much of the battery turning anything else on first. But we do need to turn on the fuel boost pumps. The boost pumps are in the nacelle tanks here behind the engine, and they are low pressure pumps, and they supply fuel to the engine and the high pressure pump in the engine. And the boost pumps need to be on before engine start, essentially until engine shutdown. They make sure there's a nice constant fuel pressure supply to the high pressure pump, and without them turned on, you can get cavitation in the high pressure pump, damages, and you can't run for many hours. I think it's 10 hours or something if the boost pump isn't on or has failed before you have to sort of strip down or replace the high pressure pump. So the first thing to do is turn well, actually that's not the first thing. It'll become clear in a minute. The first thing I'm going to do is close the firewall shut-off valves, which are down here, protected by these covers, and the reason for that will become apparent in a minute, but just trust me for now. So unfortunately you'll find that they won't close without some power, and they should be, I believe, I've been told they should be on the hot battery bus, which means they should work anyway, but not in X-Plane. Now normally you could just turn on the battery here briefly, close them and turn it off again, but on this mod there's this ground comms power switch which just supplies power to, I think, one of the radios. I think if I turn that on, you'll see that I can now turn on, although I've had problems getting the display brightness to work, so I'm not gonna bother about that for now. But the main reason for turning it on is to get power to the switches, which will now work. So that's the firewall valves shut, and I can turn off this power. And the firewall valves essentially are in the essentially cut off the fuel supply to the engine, and you would use them in the event of an emergency or an engine fire or a leak. So those are now closed. Now I'm going to turn the boost pumps on. Now you can tell the boost pumps operating. One way is you can actually hear them. Notice the battery's still off. Now they're fairly faint, but you can actually hear them operate. But the other way we're going to test them is we're going to turn on the battery, and we're going to check the warning lights, and you'll see we've got left fuel pressure and right fuel pressure. So how come, why is that, given that we've got the boost pumps on? Well, the reason is we've got the firewall valve shut, so although the boost pumps are pumping, the fuel's being stopped before it can get into the engine and the fuel pressure sensor. So what we can do now is close the open the firewall valves, and we should see these fuel pressure warning lights go out. And that tells us two things. It tells us the firewall valve is operating and the boost pump is operating. So let's close the right one, and the right fuel pressure light's gone out. If you look at the left fuel pressure light up here, that's also gone out. So we're now happy we have operating boost pumps, which is great. Now there are more checks you can do on the fuel system, but in order to avoid wasting battery for the start of the engine, I'm not going to do those now. I'll do those once the engines are started. So let's get ready to start. So the parking brake is on. Beacon I'm going to turn on, so people know that we're going to start. Pilot operating handbook, I've been told, suggests opening the bleed air valves to reduce the chances of a hot start. I'm going to open the inertial separators, called engine anti-ice here, which they open vanes in the intake before the main intake of the engine, where any sort of particles, gravel or ice, are inertially separated and ejected before they reach any of the combustion parts of the engine. So they should be on before start, and they can be left on during taxi and right up to the point of takeoff, because depending on the model you may lose some power on the climb due to air diversion or drag or whatever, so you will turn them off before takeoff, but they're on for start. And now we just make sure the levers are in the correct position, so props full forward. We want fuel cut off, and we want power lever at idle. Now start switch is what we need next. The start switch has got three positions. In the middle it's off, down, and it starts to spin the engine, but without trying to ignite or introduce any fuel, so it's just spinning the engine. And you could use that if you had a hot engine and you wanted to cool it down. But what we want to do is move it to the up position, where it will use the generator to turn over the engine, and then we'll introduce and also turn on the igniter to create spark. Then we'll introduce fuel once we've got turbine RPM up to about 20%, and then we should get a decent start. So let's get that right engine started. So we're now watching the turbine RPM here. So when it reaches about 20%, we'll introduce fuel up to low idle. There we go. We'll watch the ITT. It may cross the first red line, but it shouldn't cross the start red line. And it's coming back. When this reaches turbine RPM, which is 50%, we can turn off the starter. In fact, it's important to do that, otherwise it'll wear it out or overload it. We can now turn on the before we do that, let's go high idle now. And the reason for going high idle, now the engine's settled, is that we're going to use the generator on number 2 to start number 1. So let's get the generator on now, and that's the procedure to do that is turn it on, hold it in reset for a couple of seconds. You should see now we've got some load on that generator, so it's now recharging the battery for the power that's just been taken out of it to do the start, but also at high idle it's capable of providing all the power we need to start the left engine, and it's also cooling the engine being at high idle. So let's get that left engine started. Start it on, monitor turbine RPM, look for about between 15-20%, introduce fuel, watch the ITT. Obviously you'd pull back the fuel if it start to come up to this second red line. That looks good. Watch for 50% here, starter off, and now we can also turn on the left and reset the left generator, and the gauges look good, so I'm going to bring both engines back now to low idle. There we go. So both engines now happily running. Inverter warning lights, we can turn the inverter on, produce AC for the things that need AC. And before doing anything else, I'm going to do the rest of the fuel system checks. If you have a look at how much fuel we've got, you see that we've got enough for the flight. but it's split into the fuel tank 1 here is to the left. Let's look at the left side. Fuel tank 1 is the wing, and fuel tank 3 is the nacelle. The nacelle at the moment is not full. But what you'll find is that once we turn the transfer pumps on, fuel will move from the wing and into the nacelle tanks. But I'll just show that in a minute. So the switch here changes these gauges to show you either the total amount of fuel or just the nacelle fuel. If you switch to just the nacelle fuel and we turn on the transfer pumps, you should see the nacelle fuel start to slowly rise. The transfer pumps are pumps that transfer fuel at fairly low pressure from the wing tanks into the nacelle tank, and they kind of operate and they turn themselves on and off with the pressure switch, so they kind of basically keep the nacelle tank topped up. The nacelle tank is where the boost pumps live. The boost pumps then supply the engine, so fairly simple actually once you see how it all hangs together. So the transfer pumps should be on, just so we can, I think fuel will gravity feed in, but not all of it, so you really want the transfer pumps on to make sure you can use all the fuel that you've got. There's a transfer test switch here. I'm just going to operate that each side. You should see a low pressure light come on and go out, and that's the test. It comes on and goes out, and I'll do the same on the right. Yep, so that's fine. The other thing I'm going to do is turn on set crossfeed to auto. Crossfeed will kick in and move fuel from one nacelle tank to the engine on the other side. It won't actually like put fuel into the other tanks or anything. It's just used to feed the engine on the other side. If there's a drop in pressure on the on one side. So to make that clear, this is transfers now on auto. If I fail the right boost pump, crossfeed should come on, and that means that now fuel is feeding from the left nacelle tank across the crossfeed pipe to the right engine, and so that means that the crossfeed there is working. Let's just put that back on. Let's reset the crossfeed, and we'll do the same with the left boost pump. We'll fail the left boost pump, and again crossfeed should show up, which it does. So we'll reset that, leave it on auto, and that's it. Apart from keeping an eye on the gauge, we do not need to worry about the fuel system anymore. Okay, we can now do the let's do the auto feather and auto ignition test. Now I'm not 100% sure whether you can do this sat on a stand or whether you'd have to do it in a runoff area. You're not revving the engines particularly high, so I'm going to assume we can do it here. There's a test switch here which I've bound, it's spring loaded. I've bound a keyboard key to it to hold it in the test position. I'll explain what it does as we do the checks. Turn on auto ignition. Auto ignition is basically a system where it will start to spark the engines in the event of low torque and an engine flame out to try and reignite them. You see here now ignition's active because we're at fairly low torque at the moment, and auto feather will kick in normally at quite a high RPM or quite a high torque, but with the switch, the test switch held down, it kicks in at a low RPM to allow us to test it. So kind of forgetting all that, the way you do the test is you look for these two greens to be on, hold down the test switch, advance the power levers. When we get to certain RPM, auto feather will be activated. Normally it's much higher than that because the test switch is held in, it's in now. Keep going and the ignition should go out. Now the auto feather system is now active, which means that if one of the engines hits reduced torque, it should feather the prop. So I'm going to pull back the power lever on the left engine and you should see it feather, and the right auto feather light should go out. There we go, left engine has feathered, right auto feather's gone out. And the reason for the right one going out is that the system will not feather both engines at the same time, so if it thinks it's already feathered the left one, it deactivates the system for the right. Let's just do the same thing on the right. Let's pull back the, oops, not both, let's pull back the right engine, and that's feathered as well. Great, so we're happy with that. We can let go of the test switch and return the engines back to normal. Okay, that's most of the system test done that I'm going to do. I believe there's a prop governor test, but I'm not going to do that. Let's get some more avionics and stuff turned on. Actually, let's turn off auto ignition now. I'm not going to turn it on until we're on the runway for flight, because we don't want it to activate during taxiing when we may have low torque or RPM. Avionics master power can come on. HSI power can come on. I'm going to set the display for wind, and I want this display on the HSI. Okay. Another thing I'll mention while I'm here is flight director. If we turn the flight director on, now the advice I've been given the flight director is quite interesting. I would never have thought of this myself. So the flight director master is on, but you can also bind a toggle switch to the flight director. So if I go to my joystick bindings, I've got one button here, this one, flight director toggle. You'll see there's a few flight director controllers you can bind to keys or buttons. So flight director toggle is the one you want. I'm going to toggle the flight director off, and what that means is that once we've taken off, trim the aircraft, I can then hit heading and climb modes, and the flight director will come back on. It will be correctly armed and indicating the heading and the pitch for the climb. But you'll see that hopefully once we've taken off. Let's get common nav radios turned on. Let's get transponder turned on, and we turn on ADF. We may or may not use the ADF. Now the wind here at Kirkwall, I think it favours runway 27. Let me just check. So the wind is 260 at 7. So runway 27. So heading bug to 27. And while we're there, what was the QNH? 994. So that's fairly low. Let's get that back down to 9. It's going to take us a while. 994, and we should do the same over here. Actually, it would help if I could see it, wouldn't it? I think I've got a co-pilot thing positioned. No, not that one. This one? Yeah. Oh, actually too low. Okay, both set. Altitude today we're going to 12,000. Let's set that, and let's get the cabin pressure set for 12,000 as well. Aircraft altitude we want to be at 12,000. There we go. It's fairly low for a King Air. Obviously it could go much higher than that. I'm going to turn this thing on because DME we're going to need it later. While I forget, I remember I'm going to arm auto feather. Should be able to take off. And let's think a little bit about nav. I've mentioned that we're going to be using VORs. The only one we need to tune in just now is Kirkwall, which is 108.6. So let's get that tuned in. We're going to depart on a 248 radial. So I'm going to set a course of 248 here. And make sure this is set to VOR1, which it is, so that's all good for nav. We've got the runway heading pointer on the runway. Inertial separators on. Right, I think we're pretty close to taxi here. Temperatures look good. Now then, taxi. Let's turn the taxi light on. Let me just get head tracking just for the taxi area. Okay, I think we are ready to taxi. We're not going to use flaps on takeoff, they're up. Trim, I'm going to set, I'll double check again later, but let's just set it approximately there. A bit of up trim. Actually, the cloud, we've got a bit of low cloud here now. We'll check the weather in Stornoway once we get going. Must be some sun because seeing it there. Put the transponder to on, and we'll put it to alt when we're holding, ready to go onto the runway, and we'll also turn the strobes on. bit of beta here to slow down before the hold short line. So we want to turn our transponder to alt. Oops. We also want strobes on, landing lights on. I guess I might turn the pitos on as we have got clouds up there. What else do we need? Should be it for there. Okay, landing lights, strobes, yeah. Better turn the nav lights on, I guess, if it's kind of dark. We'll just backtrack to the right on the runway here for a takeoff. Check the runway's clear. It's okay. Final checker, flaps, trim, all looks good. Props are full forward, that's fine. Okay. Now we want to turn the auto ignition on and the engine anti-ice off. Auto feathers on, trim, feather. Yeah, I think we're good to go. So we're going to accelerate. We're going to take off. We're going to climb to about 500 feet. We're going to make a left-hand turn towards our course, and then we'll see about engaging the flight director and the autopilot. Okay, here goes. Forward pressure on the stick. For our airspeed. Airspeed's coming alive. 80 knots. Gonna rotate about 100. There we go. And dab the brakes and gear up. And we want to pitch here for about 150 knots on the climb out. We're above 500 feet already, so let's start our turn. And I'm in fact going to bring the prop back to climb RPM. Just watch that pitch. 2000 RPM for climb. Again, we want about 150 knots. I'm just going to turn the heading bug to approximately where we want it to be. Now I am just going to level off here. Aircraft is reasonably trimmed. I'm going to press heading and climb, which you'll see now the flight director is indicating to me pitch and steering, and now I can engage the autopilot. Seamless, hopefully. And as you can see, we're closing in on our course as the course offset bar comes in line. Yeah, weather's not too great. So looking good on temperatures, everything else looks good. I'm going to now turn auto feather off, prop sync can come on. The landing lights can come off. Actually, there's a bit of blue sky there in the kind of in the distance. Now, you'll notice with the turboprop. Oh, actually, we're going off course now, aren't we? Talking way too much. Let's get back on course, and it's Hoy there we're going to be going over. I'm actually just going to press nav. and let the aircraft line up with the bearing that we want to be on. And we do have alt arm, and we have alt sail here, so we should capture. So climb mode, which is one I don't think I'd properly used. Climb mode's great, so that's what we're in now with the climb switch here. Climb mode will hold 150 knots while it can, which is kind of your best rate of climb speed, I guess. Certainly we're getting a good 2,000 feet per minute at the moment. And then above, you know, as you get higher, if it's no longer able to maintain 150, it will kind of it will drop the climb rate, so it's always safe. So it's a really good one to use for climbs. So that's a great tip. Now you'll notice here that our torque and ITT have fallen back a little bit, so I am gonna increase the power here with the turboprop. As you go up in altitude and the air gets thinner, you can use some of the reserve. You can just basically increase the fuel and get some torque back. And so as you're climbing, you need to adjust every so often. You need to adjust the power lever to keep the torque or the IC, whichever one's the limit, at whatever position you want it at. Now we're on a headwind 21 knots here. That's not too bad. Now we'll consider navigation again in a minute. Let's just get up to 12,000 feet first, and we'll just have a look at Orkney below us. As I say, the island of Hoy there, with the old man of Hoy on the other side. Kirkwall's back over here somewhere, the airport we've taken off from. That's the north coast of Scotland here. That's the island of Stroma. John O'Groats is approximately here. There's stacks of Duncansby, sea stacks sticking up over there. This is Thurso Scrabster, where you get the main ferry to Orkney. We're essentially, if we cut back to just a little nav map for a second, you'll see that effectively our course takes us right over the tip of Cape Wrath here, and then out to Stornoway. Actually, the weather's quite decent now. In fact, I'm not even sure we need pitot heat on, but I'll leave it on. What's the outside temperature? What's the outside air temperature? Is that minus 12? Yeah. Okay, let's leave it on anyway, because I guess you need a small amount of ice to block your pitot tubes. So we're coming up to 11,000. So hopefully, yeah, there's their altitude alert, 1,000 feet before, and then at 12,000, the autopilot should capture the altitude. And again, I can move the power lever forwards a bit to get us some more torque and some more speed now. And now that we're leveling off, I can bring the prop back to cruise RPM. I'm going to go for 1900. Let's do that. Okay, good. We're now in cruise. Now then, in terms of navigation, we're 15 miles from Kirkwall already, and at some point we're going to lose the signal from the Kirkwall VOR. So what I would like to do instead, let's have a look at a Navigraph. Let's make that a bit bigger for now. So what I would like to do is effectively tune in the Stornoway VOR. We may not pick it up yet, but at some point in the flight we'll want to switch to that. So we basically just want to switch to the same bearing, but to the Stornoway VOR. So it's 115.1, which I have actually got tuned in here, but also I've got tuned in over here. So what I'm going to do, well, there's a good indication that something's happening, because the VOR needle here for nav 2 is just swept. But if we want to be sure, we can listen to nav 2. Stornoway dash dot. Yep, we got it. So we're already in range, so I could switch to that now, and then we know that we're not going to lose signal, because as we get nearer Stornoway, it's only going to get stronger. So let me just get rid of the chart here. Yeah, the switch there that you didn't see was this one here for the nav2 audio on and off. So what I'll do is I'm going to switch over to frequency, but to avoid any kind of jumping around, I'm going to go heading mode briefly. So make sure your heading is synced first of all, and we'll go to heading mode. Now we can switch nav frequency over, and hopefully once it settles, this should come in and we should almost be on the correct course. I'm just going to adjust the course slightly because I don't really want to change what we got. Well, there we go, that should line us up, and now I'm going to switch back to nav. Great, now we're back in nav, but we're now heading direct to Stornoway VR, which you can see is 89 miles away. I guess you might pick it up at this height from that distance. I mean, it's almost like, I mean, you could almost see, if it wasn't hazy, I guess you may be able to see past Cape Wrath here at Stornoway. So yeah, I guess that's quite reasonable. Now, in terms of our arrival, okay, let's just check. Let's check the winds and the weather at Stornoway. The way I usually do that is again through little nav maps. So if you hover over the airport, it will tell you the METAR, and the METAR is winds at 230. VFR, great. Okay, so it looks reasonable. But winds at 230, so that suggests runway 18. So runway 18 at Stornoway. Let's have a look at the arrival for runway 18 on Navigraph. It's quite a fun arrival actually. So what we're going to do is we're coming in 248 radial to Stornoway, which is kind of sort of like this, I guess. We're gonna initial approach fix here is the Stornoway VOR, and then you have to go out on this 04 radial to this distance, make a left turn, essentially to intercept the final approach course. It's fairly straightforward, and it means a couple of things. It means we're going to need the localizer tuned in. So what I'm going to do, let's just move this over for a second. That's not really still going to be in the way. Let's take it away. Localizer is 110.9, so I'm going to tune 110.9 on here, because we'll need to switch to the localizer for the final approach. We've already got it tuned in over here, so that's fine. Yeah, we need a localizer, and we also need to know how we're going to enter this hold to do our course reversal, because we're coming in here. We can't just turn around and go up here. We wouldn't, we wouldn't be aligned in time to get an accurate bearing by the time we need to turn. So we need to go into the hold, make one circuit around the hold, come back, and then we can go out. How are we going to enter the hold? Well, let's get Holding Buddy up and we'll have a look. It's an app I wrote just to help with holding entries. Turn off Navigraph for a second. Actually, no, we can have both on. Okay, so let's just make you a little bit bigger. Oh, not you, this one. Okay, that'll do. You can save holds in this as well. Up to 5 holds can be saved, so I can select Stornoway. We're coming in on a course 248. Actually puts us on the boundary here between a parallel entry and a direct entry, so I think we'll go parallel. So with a parallel entry, you always start by flying to the initial approach to the the fix for the hold, which in this case is the VOR. You always, so regardless of which entry it is, you always fly there first. In this case, we fly there, we then go out on the inbound so the reciprocal, so 140 degrees, 1 minute, make a 180 turn, and then another 45 degree turn and come back, and then we can go out on our 004 course. So basically it's parallel entry. So that's fine. Yeah, the only other thing we need to set up at the moment was a couple of things. Altitude wise, we need to be at 3,000 feet when we get to the hold. So I'm going to dial that in now, just so we're ready. We've got 9,000 feet to lose because we're at 12. So 9 times 3 is 27, so we want to start descending 27 miles before we get to the initial approach fix. The distance initial approach fix here is 72, so we can just watch that. When that says 27, we'll start to descend. That's simple enough. And the other thing we need is, if you look at the chart again, one subtlety with this approach is that when you're flying out on this 004, so after we've gone around the hole, flying out on 004 radial from 115.1 STN, the distance where you need to make your turn is actually measured from the localizer, not from here. So what it means is we need a distance readout for the localizer as well as knowing the bearing from STN. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the DME instrument here. It's currently reading the same distance it's reading the distance to STN. We need it to read the distance to STW. Well, there is a switch here which switches over between nav1 and nav2. Okay, so at the moment nav2 is on 115.1, so if we move it to 110.9, which is STW, now STW is just a localizer, so it doesn't have a very long range, so we're not picking it up yet, but we will later, so we'll leave it on that for now, because we have our STN distance here, we want our STW to appear here. Now localizer is not the same as an ILS. A localizer just gives you horizontal guidance for your final glide slope. It doesn't give you the glide slope itself, so we have to manually do that. So just to show you, I mean, we'll come back to this later, but what it means is that when we get onto the final approach course, this 178 degree course, you'll see that when we get to 6.1 DME from STW, we need to start descending, and the descent rate depends on your ground speed. We'll probably want about 700 feet per minute, 600-700 feet per minute, but we'll get to that when we get there. So I think that's it. So to summarise all that, the thing we need to do first is descend. We don't descend till we get to 27 miles away. We've set our altitude that we want to be at the fix, so we're ready for that, so that's fine. So there's nothing really to do now other than keep an eye on things like fuel, keep an eye on engine instruments, and until we get ready to descend. So what I'm going to do, stop talking for a bit, just let's have a look at some of the scenery here. We got the Northwest Highlands there. This is Cape Wrath coming up. Looking back over the north coast of Scotland and back to Orkney, where we've come from. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video here for a bit, and I'll come back with you when we're getting ready to start the descent, and I'll see you in a bit. Welcome back, and we're just leaving the northwest tip of Scotland now, and in fact you can see Stornoway over here in the distance already. Just to show you where we are on the map, you can see here we are leaving the northwest corner. We've crossed Cape Wrath. Okay, we need to start descending at 27 miles. We're at 37, so we've got 10 miles to go. What descent rate do we need? Well, I always do the multiply ground speed by 5. Our ground speed's 211, so let's go for 5.2. That's 1,005. Let's go for 1,100 feet per minute, or as close as we can get to that, because I think the steps are in 200s, but we'll see. The other thing we'll need to do is set local pressure when we start Oh, do you know what I haven't done? And I do this every time. We've done this whole flight not at flight level 120 because I haven't set. I'm not going to do it now because it's just going to throw everything off. But I have not set the altimeter to 1013, and I don't know how I'm going to get out of that habit because I'm really bad at it. So I'm not going to bother setting it now because that'll just throw us up or down, up. But I will down. I will set it to the correct setting before during the descent. So sorry about that. This should be at 1013, and that should have been set when we were cleared to climb to flight level 120, which would have been on departure from Kirkwall. I need to put that in my checklist. Okay, aside from that, coming up 27 miles where we want to start descent. Pretty decent weather actually. I say that sticking out bit of land there is actually where the VOR is that we're heading to for our initial approach fix. So in fact from here it looks quite close. Going up to 27.5, I'm going to engage VS mode. Initially the vertical speed is 0, I've got it up here on this data readout. Going to hit the keyboard binding, the minus plus keys I've got on the remote keypad, and I'm going to take us down to, let's go 1,000 feet per minute because I think we've got plenty of, well we'll probably speed up in the descent, so let's go 1,200. And I'm just going to take the power lever back a bit now because I don't want to increase our speed too much above 200. So let's just stabilize that. And remember we're on a course direct for this STN VOR, which is the entry point to the hold. Now while we're doing this, let's just have a look at a bit more landing prep. If you look at Stornoway Airport here, we're going to be landing runway 18 here from the north. You can see that essentially we're not going to make that runway exit. The next one's down here, it's taxiway C, which will take us around here. So there's no need to sort of slow down too quickly on the runway because we're going to have to roll all the way down here anyway. We are still speeding up, so I'm just gonna. Also, the reverse happens with the turboprop when you're descending. Of course, the torque tends to increase as you get into the more denser air, so you need to compensate for that by pulling the power lever back a bit. I say I don't want to overspeed here, so let's just maintain this for now. Weather looks pretty decent for our arrival. Let's set the local QNH. 996 is what X-Plane reckons. What does little navmat reckon? It reckons 998. Well, I better go with let's go with 996. I mean, we're nearly on that anyway because I forgot to set it, obviously. Now, we'd have been okay in the US, I guess, at 12,000 feet on local pressure setting. It's just this is obviously not the US. Now, if you notice as well, the DME readout here has come alive, telling us that we are 22 miles from STW and we're 18 from STN. That makes perfect sense because STN is effectively here on this bit of land and STW is over at the airport, so they're about 4 miles apart. Now what happens is, well, as we get nearer, I think I'm going to try and put the Navigraph chart on the screen. So that you can see it. I'll minimize it because I can overlay the aircraft position. It'll kind of show you what part of the procedure we're on. So when we get, say, within about 1.5 miles of the VOR, I'm going to switch to heading mode because we need to be ready to turn into the hold, turn left to 140 degrees. So around about here. It's going fairly fast. I'm just going to torque back a bit again. So north tip of Stornoway there. Sorry, north tip of Lewis, not Stornoway. Stornoway is just the town. Butt of Lewis and the lighthouse up here. Okay. Got our nav ready with the localizer 110.9. Let's just double check that it is 110.9. Yep. Actually, notice at the moment the wind is completely head on here, which I guess means we're going to have a bit of a crosswind. Now, let's just see if we can get Navigraph on here without taking up too much room. Let's make it smaller. I'm not sure if it's going to be a huge amount of use to you, but you can see here the pink kind of triangle thing shows where we are. And you can see we're coming to the hold, then we're going to try and go on the outbound course to intercept the runway approach. So I'll leave it on and see. Now how far are we? 6.3 miles from the hold. Going to make sure the head-in bug is kind of synchronized. So I'm intending to turn about half a mile before the VOR, just because there's no much point overshooting it really. We want to stay more on the protected side of the hold on the inside anyway, so in fact, you know, maybe 3/4 of a mile would do. And the airport in fact is over here approximately, I think. I don't think we can really see it. Yeah, maybe that might be it. Okay, we're close to 3,000 feet now. Going to get busy now, so we just kind of need to try and stay one step ahead. We have to watch that when we level off that we don't go too slow, but I think we'll be okay with the power setting we're on at the moment. In fact, let's bring that back a little bit. Coming into 1 mile now, I'm going to switch to heading mode, so we're ready to steer for the hold. So when this gets about 0.5, We should, I mean, yeah, we should see our deviation start to increase. I'm now going to turn left to 140 degrees to enter the hold, and I'm going to start a timer for 1 minute. Now there should be there is a timer on the plane somewhere, but I'm just going to use the one that Holding Buddy's got. So I'll start the timer once we've completed the turn. In fact, we're probably going a bit fast for this hold, so let's just... And we haven't captured our altitude, so let's just stop that right now. For some reason, I guess I didn't press Alt Cell, so we're going to be a bit low. I'm not going to worry about that too much. We should have stopped at 3,000 feet. That was my bad. I should have checked the Alt Cell, but we'll stay where we are for now. I mean, we need to leave the hold at 3,000, but then we need to descend to 2. We're above the MSA now anyway, so it's okay. Right, we've turned, so I start the timer. So I'm now timing 1 minute. And we're on an outbound heading of 140. The wind's a bit from the right, so I guess we should be steering slightly into it, but because we end up overshooting on a parallel entry anyway, so I won't worry about that too much. We're okay for power at the moment. If we hold this sort of speed, that's fine. I'm actually going to turn the runway landing lights on, because a fair amount of cloud now and we are getting near. It's 43 seconds. Oh dear. Firewall shut-off valves. Let's turn the fuel off to that engine. Oh, let's feather both engines. Oh, great. Okay. We need to kind of find our best. So I've feathered both the engines. I'm never going to get them started in time. I don't think we're going to make the runway, but let's see if we can try and glide. We want the blue line speed for best rate of glide. I don't think we're going to make the runway, but let's turn towards land. Let's try and trim down. Yes, I'm definitely over banking. It would help if we could see some land, but I don't think we're gonna. I'm not sure we're gonna be able to make it. Also not sure exactly where the runway is. This may be a water landing, in which case I guess we want to get as close to... I'm not quite sure why that happens. I've had this happen, and in fact, have we still got the left? The left engine's still working. Okay, hang on. Oh, it's reignited, or it had, but now it's dead. Okay, I haven't got time to shut. I don't think I've got time to shut the valve. Well, I should do, really, shouldn't I? Let's do it. We don't want any more fuel to be burning than we have to. Yeah, so I think we'll just take it in blue line and hope we can get as near to the coast as possible. And I guess we would be transmitting a mayday at this point. As I say, I'm not quite sure. I've had this happen on the mod before, and I don't know why. There tends to not be any warning lights. I've also had it happen on the normal C90. Yeah, if anyone knows why, I'd appreciate it. I think the best bet here is going to be a water landing, but as near to the shore as possible. Should we land into the wind, I guess? The wind's blowing from the air, so we want to make a left turn. Still got 1,000 feet here. Both props are feathered. Watch that glide speed. Now, obviously we don't want to drop the gear for a water landing. I guess we want to use flaps at the last minute so we can slow ourselves down. Hopefully we're going to be near enough to be rescued. I was hoping the fire might have gone out by now, but I guess the water might help with that.
Bank angle, bank angle.
I disagree. Some mysterious water artifacts coming up here as well. So I guess we should maybe think about selecting flaps.
Caution terrain. Caution terrain.
So we can slow down. I'm going to go full flaps. Haven't really managed to turn very well here, but we definitely want to hit the water flat, I would have thought, not with any wing low. So let's level. Let's not stall, so let's keep enough airspeed. We need to probably be, we won't get away with much above 70, much below 70.
Caution terrain.
200.
Caution terrain.
We're fairly near the shore at least.
Caution terrain.
100.
Caution terrain.
Okay, we're going to stall. We're going to be a nit nearer the water before we stall. Let's pull back now. Oh no! Ooh. I think I would have actually dug the nose in there. How do we stop now? That's a fair point. I am braking, but I guess there's not a lot of point really. Oh, well, at least I'm not sure you saw that Microsoft Defender. Oh, I'm brilliant! I kind of disagree about crashing there. I think that was a pretty good beach landing. Anyway, yeah, so maybe we'll have to come back another time for the approach and landing, but I mean the main thing I wanted to demonstrate was the the start up, the fuel system checks, the engine start, all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully that might have been useful, and what I think I'm going to do now is probably exit via the door at the rear, because I don't really fancy the front one, although yeah, that's not too great either. I think what I'd probably do is just jump straight into the water and then head out that way. Anyway, I am gonna go and see if I've got any kind of life jacket, and I shall see you see you again another time. Goodbye.